Howdy. Oh, that's not scary at all. Good to see you. Right by Whitley. Yeah, good to see everybody. Thanks for being here on this Wednesday night. A little chilly. It's warm in here. It feels good. Luke chapter 12. Mr. Roy's put a challenge before me. He said, well, I feel like it is anyway. He said we can't make it through chapter 12. Or, well, he doesn't think anyway. I'm afraid he's right. But let's see. Let's see what we can do. Okay, and I don't think we're going to make it through Roy either. It's super rich, but listen, I don't speed through something just to say we got through it. I also don't want to just keep the wheels turning in mud. Try to find a good balance on that. As long as we're having good, productive conversation and learning, that's the most important thing. Learning, that's what it's about. All right, so we are in Luke 12, and as you're going to Luke 12, we left off with verse number 13 last time. We got through 12 very quickly there at the end, and verse 13 is where we're going to pick up. And as you're going to that place, I want you to fire off in your mind here. If you could have one conversation with Jesus, and I'm talking just mano a mano, Jesus, he's back here still on the earth, or comes back, whatever it is. On the earth, that's key though. Something to help you or somebody else, or just crazy interest you have about something. Any one question that you could ask Jesus, what would you ask him? Now, I know that's not putting you on the spot. Marcy, really? She's like, all right, fine, go ahead. Oh, okay, great question. Yes. Okay, with you there. Absolutely. How many times have we seen or had loved ones ourselves, or just people even that are distant? It just crushes you. It breaks your heart. Why do people have to suffer in general, especially children? Okay, great question. But he'd have a really good answer too. All right, anybody else? You've had a little more time since Marcy. Marcy is, why do people have to suffer, but really in particular, like children? Innocent, or, that kind of thing. Good. All right, so Roy would ask, Jesus, would you mind just in a nutshell, just in a few words, or you know what? I've got the day. Tell me. What's the purpose as you would lay it out? I love it. What else? Okay. So Marty would say, I know what he said. I'm just trying to think here. What are the top 10s? And maybe I'm putting a bias spin on it. Okay, all right. What are top 10? What are top 10 differences within religious groups who profess you? I might say, what are the top 10 reasons that there are? Even okay. Yeah, I like it. No, you're free. You're entitled to it. Okay. Anyone else? Tony? Okay. Any specifics on that? Just. Okay. All right. Great. I would have asked the same thing. We all want to know why is Tony the way he is? Very good. I like that. Yeah, but and that goes. I won't get too deeply into that, just because I appreciate the segue for Sunday. It's we're planning it for last Sunday. That didn't go the way we'd planned, but that's all right. And isn't that so true, though? I mean, that's how we are, right? If we would have planned us, we wouldn't have planned us the way we are. But for someone who lives by faith, we have this, hopefully, deep appreciation for exactly the way God made us. And we wouldn't change it, because there is a reason He made us the way He did. He wants us that way for some reason. Very good. Okay, any others? All right. Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead, John, then we'll move on. Awesome. Right. I'm with you. I don't know if everyone else has the same weakness that John and I do, but I absolutely, I appreciate it. I think all these are super that have been thrown out. I would probably say, yeah, that would be up there for sure for me. Yeah. And I'll... My question is, may I have unlimited questions? I don't think he's a genie, okay? So we shouldn't. All right, yeah, that's a pretty good one right there. We all have so many questions we'd ask Jesus, and it's not fair, because I'm asking you for pointed ones, and in all honesty, I don't have a clue what my one question. I don't even know if I'd care to ask a question. I think maybe just be like, will you please just talk and just never stop. Wouldn't it be so amazing? But wouldn't that be hard if you had just the one thing that you could ask? I have no doubt, though, as you all have tossed out, every one of us would put some spiritual inquiry before our Lord. And some of these, as you've done, probably some deep theological question, and just sit and listen to Him, all the opportunities. If you had one question you could ask Jesus, or just one thing you could say, just one conversation that you could have, it may not even be a question. So I want you to look in Luke chapter 12. In Luke 12, verse 13, contemplate this. This guy can have a conversation with Jesus about anything that he wants. He can bring up a question, or he can just say, Lord, will you please start talking on this subject? And never stop. Verse 13, then one from the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. So, first of all, I'm sure the guy probably has a legitimate qualm about the dispute that's been going on in the family. I'm sure he probably wants more than what he currently has. You know what? To the guy's credit, maybe he could really use more than he has right now. It could be that everybody in the family has blackballed him and has cheated him. Maybe they've even violated law to take what he has coming to him. That being said, if you take a step back and there's any question you could ask the Lord, or any conversation that you could have with Him, and your request more or less is, will you tell my brother to give me the $1,000 he owes me? Really? That's the best with which you could come up in that circumstance. I want you to look at Jesus' response. And I'll just mention this. We're not going to turn, I don't think, and read about it. We'll utilize our time a little more wisely. But if you're interested in Deuteronomy 21, verses 15 through 17. Deuteronomy 21, 15 through 17. Under the law that they're living, the law of Moses, understanding Jesus is among a Jewish crowd, very likely interacting with Jews, who are supposed to be following the law of Moses. And there it's legally laid out that the older, in a case of two brothers, possibly even oldest, would get how much of an inheritance? Anybody remember that? Compared to a double. There you go. So he's going to get a double portion. We don't know if this guy's an older, younger. We do know he has a sibling. That's the only one that he mentions. But there are rules, even under the law of Moses religiously, that are supposed to be followed. So he probably has a legitimate concern here. But the issue is, if you could ask anything, if you could talk about anything, why would you pick this thing and make this request of Jesus? So, Jesus, in verse 14, he said to him, man, who made me a judge or an arbitrator over you? Of course, we understand Jesus in the end, he has a role as judge, although even, to an extent religiously, he specifically tells us, I did not come what? To judge or condemn, right? To go ahead and pass the judgment that everybody deserved when he showed up. That's not my purpose in coming. Why did he come? But to... Okay, thanks. I don't know how much lower I could go. To save. Lord, I didn't come to judge or to condemn the world. I came to save the world. Okay, that's the first time, right? But then God tells us, okay, the second time I'm sending my son, and he's not coming to save the world, is he? Why is he coming the second time? To take us home and to give those who trouble us trouble or vengeance, 2 Thessalonians 1, themselves. In other words, he's coming to judge the world. God has appointed a day, Acts 17, 30 and 31, on which he will judge the world by the man whom he's ordained, Christ. Time's coming for that, but it's not this period right here. And he asked him, man, who made me a judge or an arbitrator, you might say a mediator on earth among people about menial things that really don't matter when it's all said and done? I don't know who made him that. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sure, Roy. Well stated. And if everybody lived by the law of Christ and his principles, judgments, if you will, that he's laid out, we actually wouldn't need any judges on the earth, would we? We talk about how we wouldn't fight any wars, and we would be a lot better place, wouldn't it? Wouldn't hate each other either. We would love one another, and we would be not divided on everything, but we would be united on everything meaningful. Yeah, it'd be a better world, wouldn't it? So who made me? I think this is probably what it is. Jesus is a preacher. And, preachers, I think they're made to be jacks of all trades, aren't you? I think they should be preachers. I believe they ought to be family counselors. I believe they ought to be relationship experts. I think they ought to be good carpenters. We know our Lord was, certainly. I think they should be electricians. I think they ought to work well with the chainsaw. Sometimes we get all of these concepts about preachers. Well, they need to know this, and they need to do this, or this, when those aren't necessarily all those roles. And that might be what's going on back here. Okay, Jesus, you need to do this. Why? Because you're a preacher, and that's what preachers do. You need to bring people into this world. You need to send them out of this world. Preachers do a lot of things. We have a lot of expectations. And that may be this right here. Well, you're a preacher, and for him, he's the prince of preachers. He wrote the book on it. So maybe it's that. You ought to be able to do this just like you should be able to do so many other things. We are to our memory verse. Sorry we didn't get to that last time. Luke chapter 12, verse 15. Anybody want to say that one? Very helpful for daily life. Terry, Yeah, I'm just making sure. Okay, all right. It's been so many years, I'm not sure what you do when you have hair. So apparently when you have hair, sometimes you need to brush it back. Okay. So Roy, go ahead. Right. Yeah, very good. Thank you for sharing that. That is powerful. Yeah, he's a very sharp guy, that's for sure, in a lot of ways. Yeah, and that's good. As Jesus would say it, out of the mouth of babes. Maybe it was a very young person.
I left out a lot of that story. I forgot parts of it, but I got the salient points.
Yeah, that's powerful. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, for sure. And one thing's for sure, a couple of scriptural considerations here. Jeremiah 29:13, God makes a promise. Now this is to his own people. But he says in Jeremiah 29:13, and you will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. Second one I'd bring out, Hebrews 11:6. Without faith it is impossible to please him. But he who comes to God must believe two things. One, that he exists. And two, that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. So I'm with you. I'm hopeful, and now I'll be prayerful that that's the case. But
in the abundance of things that he possesses.
Yeah.
Life consists of something else.
Right.
That's what his search is all about.
Yeah. And I'm curious, could it be something similar to Solomon, where he's done so many things in his life? Of course, we know with the electric cars and so on what he's done with that. But after that, social media, had a lot of interest and success in that. Now he's very, very interested in upper things. Fantastic. So, he's going from one thing to another, like Solomon did. It's very common for people who have a lot, and there's a reason often they tend to do that. It could be they get bored with things, but I think what it is in large part is he probably understands, well, I haven't found fulfillment in this, I'm going to try this. Well, I'm going to try this. So hopefully that little girl sparks something new to try. That'd be awesome. All right, thank you for sharing that. So Jesus says, and here's the application to the teaching, take heed and beware of covetousness. So let's stop and let's consider what this word is. We don't want to misunderstand. Sometimes it helps to understand a concept by recognizing what it is not. Covetousness. Anybody mind to share what is covetousness, or if you prefer, what is it not? Paul?
It's a sinful desire to have.
Okay, good. So Paul said it's a sinful desire to have something more material. All right, anybody want to add?
Sometimes jealousy is involved with that.
Could be, absolutely. So we know, if I'm not mistaken, Marty, you need to check me on this. I'm pretty sure it's the 10th. Is it the 10th commandment? I think it is. Exodus 20, if you don't mind to do that for us. If it's not, I don't think it's 9. I think it's 10. That's my final answer. But do check me. You shall not covet. What? Your neighbor's dada, lada, hada, right? Anything that belongs to somebody else. So absolutely, it could be, oh, I want that so badly. I don't want you to have it. I want me to have it. All right, and that's complete selfishness is what it is, first of all. Secondly, if God has dealt it out that way, God's in control of all. And he has a plan for me. He has a plan even for Tony, right? For every one of us, he has a plan for us. Heath, is or is not?
Is.
Okay.
But I guess until now, I've always thought it's having and attaining things, but I guess it's the road to get there.
Very good. Very good.
What the cloud of damage is between now to maybe not even get it, just to try to get it.
Excellent. Excellent, Heath. So to put all this, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Right. So that's rock solid reasoning. So that's if he is the secondborn. Now, if he's the firstborn, it could be that the secondborn has some of his stuff that he hasn't divvied up appropriately. So that's a possibility too. But yeah, good point. If he's the firstborn, that would make perfect sense. All right, let's bring all this in together now so we can build up from there. And what we have, Paul said the greedy desire to have more material things, but as Heath pointed out, and as Paul suggested and what he stated, it really doesn't have anything to say about what one has. It's not about if you have a bunch or if you have nothing or anywhere between. It has nothing to do with that. Zero. In fact, this is a very nice compliment to 1 Timothy 6. It's not those who are rich, it's those who desire to be rich. And it could be that they're desiring to be richer than what they are. It could be that they're extremely poor, always have been, maybe always will be. But there's an unhealthy desire within to be something that they're not at the moment. It has nothing to do inherently with what one currently possesses, but it's how we look at it. And it's how we pattern our lives to try to attain it, or maybe in the case we're going to find out, to try to hold on to it at all costs. Okay, so what it is not what you currently possess necessarily, but it's what you desire, what your heart's chasing, if you will, is. So take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist, meaning you're not going to find purpose and you're not going to find happiness simply because you have things. How many times, and we start learning it when we're probably 2, and we see something on TV, it's a commercial. Oh, if I could just have the singing T-Rex, my life would, I would never ask for anything again. For Christmas, we get the singing T-Rex, and we play with it for 3 minutes, and we never touch it again. And then we want the next thing. Think about it. Everything in your life, and I know it gets bigger and more expensive as life goes on, and we do that with everything. If I could just have this, or if our family, or if as a couple, or even just an individual, if I ever get to the point that I have this, and this, I will be set for life. I'll always be happy. And then maybe we get this, and then 15 other things even. And then we find ourselves, okay, yeah, that was really cool. Now I need, and it never stops. That's what covetousness is. It's simply in not being content with what we have. It's not about how much we have, but enjoying what we have, regardless of how much that is. Yes, sir. I bet. Yeah, it is. Thank you for sharing that, Brad. And I totally agree. Listen, it's not that we've never experienced any temptation before. It's not that we've never given in to any of the temptations before. It's always, whether we we're faced with it, whether we did give in or didn't, it's that we learned from it. That's what it's about. It's about growth. So I really appreciate you saying that. It's not, okay, now which of us has handled every one of these situations perfectly in our heart of hearts throughout our X amount of year? Nobody has. It's not about that. It's have we learned through these experiences of ups and downs that we've had. All right, I know we don't have a lot of time for outside. This one's so good, I cannot pass this up, okay? So please humor me on this. Turn to Philippians chapter 4. Philippians 4, and in part I want to bring this in because it speaks so well to what Brad has just stated. And consider who's doing the writing. You know, if you could pick one person that you would want to emulate, in Bible times, who are you going to pick? Well, I mean, we could all have our different, obviously Jesus, you know, outside of God in the flesh. I'm sure, you know, Paul's going to be up there. He's probably going to be offered as a suggestion as much as anyone else, I wouldn't doubt. Maybe not more, but pretty close. Okay, so listen to what he writes toward the end of days. Philippians 4, verse 10. He says, "Now I rejoice greatly at last that your care for me has flourished again. Though you surely did care, but you lacked opportunity." And he's writing to this church talking about finances is what this is. And speaking about missions, we have a missionary here. And guess what? It takes finances to do missions. And he says, hey, I'm thankful that you've shown this care and helping out financially in the ministry, is what he's telling them. Again, even though for a time you didn't do it, and I realize it wasn't that you didn't care in the time you didn't help me, just it didn't work out in the budget during that stretch, is what he's saying. But listen to this, verse 11. "Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content." Notice he doesn't say, from the womb. I wasn't watching the commercials on TV crying for the T-Rex that was singing. No, he was doing that too, okay? Even though there's no television back then. He was doing it in his heart anyway, in principle. And so he says, I have learned, or through the years, it's something I've grown to understand and appreciate, even though I haven't always. This is as a very aged, mature man. He makes this statement. Okay, verse 12. Go on with me. "I know how to be abased." That means to be brought very low. "And I know how to abound." That means you have so much you don't even know where to put it all. I've lived both, he says. "I know how to both to be hungry and to be full." And that's the context of, I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. And I love throwing verse 13 into this. I can do all things. This is kind of the climax of the writing here. I can do all things through Christ, who is my strength. And he's not talking about being a professional football player right there. Now, it's true. Jesus can be our strength in anything we do. The context is not sports, okay? What the context is economics. I can do everything economically that's needed through Christ, who is my strength or my trust. What he's saying is, I've learned through the years not to trust in money or the things that money can buy. I trust in the Lord. And whether I have $10,000 of just free assets in my bank account, $1 million, or 99 cents, I am just as content, one way or the other. Do you see what he's saying? It's not about what you have, it's about the mindset toward things. And so I just feel like that ties in really well to the passage and also just perfectly for what it was that Bradley just brought up. So going back to Luke 12, take heed and beware of covetousness. Do we get what it is now? Hopefully we understand what it's not. It's not about what you have, period. But it's about how you look at things, material things, how you look at economics, and how it does or doesn't draw your heart in. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things that he possesses, whether you have it or whether you're chasing it after it. And I especially want to make sure we get through this parable tonight. Then he spoke a parable to them, saying, "The ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, what am I going to do, since I have no room to store all this stuff? So he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will store all my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. And what he's thinking is, you've achieved everything, and now it's just time to enjoy it endlessly, is what he has in his mind. And then God has a message he delivers to him. Verse 20. He says, you are a fool. You should have asked my son what the purpose of this existence was, because you've missed it all. You've given everything in your life to get to this point, and you don't realize this is the last day that you're going to have life. This is the last that you're going to enjoy of this. Then what's going to happen to all these things for which you've worked your entire life? So there's this story itself, and I like how Jesus enters in. He says, as I'm telling you this, I have in mind a certain man, a certain rich man. I will concede, it's possible just through the linguistics, he's saying a certain type of man that I have in mind. I think it could be that there is a certain individual that he has in mind, like someone with a specific name that he watched live out this existence. I want you, if you will, to turn to, and we'll probably end with this tonight, 2 Chronicles chapter 32. And it just so happens, we're in the divided kings and kingdoms period of Israel, and it just so happens that on Sunday morning we're going to be starting a discussion of this guy's life. And I want to read, in anticipation of this, 2 Chronicles 22. We'll start in verse 24 in just a moment. Before we do that, I want to point out about this guy just a few phrases in this section, this parable that Jesus gave. He thought within himself, what shall I do since I have no room to store my crops? So he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and I will store all my crops and my goods. If you could just pick one person, on whom would you say this guy was focused when it comes to all of his blessings that have been shared with him? What's his focus? There is never a mention of anyone other than himself. Never any mention about God and any good that he could do in his service. Never any mention about anyone that he might try to help in a time when they saw lots of people every day disadvantaged in more extreme cases than we can even imagine. So who's this certain rich man Jesus has in mind? 2 Chronicles 32. Notice in verse 24. In those days, really good, overall I would say, really good king of Judah, divided kingdom in the south. In those days, Hezekiah became sick and was at the point of death, and he prayed to the Lord. And he answered him and gave him a sign. Okay, so there are a lot of things about Hezekiah's life that we often point out, and we will, in fairness, when we go through and we study it. But it seems like the latter portion we just kind of overlook about Hezekiah. We're not going to do that tonight. Verse 25, so God answers his prayer, and this is when he's on his deathbed, and Lord, I've served you faithfully all these years, and he sends the prophet Isaiah, turns him around, says, all right, go back. After he told him, you're dead. He says, okay, go back. Here, go get this medicine. It's going to be herbs and are boiled, and put it on your malignant boils, and you'll be healed. And he does, and he adds, 15 years to his life. Notice in verse 25, but Hezekiah did not make return according to the benefit done to him, for his heart was proud. We don't talk about this part very often of Hezekiah's life. So this is a man that's filled with pride, and if we're filled with pride, about whom are we thinking? Not a whole lot about God, not a whole lot about others. We think about self-incorporated. Go down to verse 27. And Hezekiah had very great riches and honor. And notice this terminology. And he made for himself treasuries for silver, for gold, for precious stones, for spices, for shields, and for all kinds of costly vessels. storehouses or barns, sound familiar? Also for the yield of grain, wine and oil, and stalls for all kinds of cattle and sheepfolds. He likewise provided cities for himself, and flocks and herds in abundance, for God had given him very great possessions. This same Hezekiah closed the upper outlet of the waters of Gihon, and directed them down to the west side of the city of David, and Hezekiah prospered in all his works. I mean, this guy was filthy rich. We may be talking, I'm sure not quite, Roy, but in Solomonic proportions, okay? Incredibly wealthy, including big barns that he has for all of his toys, including all of his grain. God is the one who's given him all this blessing, and all he can think about in the pride of his heart is himself, and how this is all for him. This is for the great king, Hezekiah. Now I ask you to turn over to the parallel of this, 2 Kings chapter 20, where he has a message from God that's going to be delivered to him. 2 Kings 20, verses 16 through 18. Then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, "Hear the word of the Lord." So here you are living this life. Oh, it's quite luxurious. It's all for you. You've forgotten about God. You don't think about him any longer. You don't think about others. This is all for you. You have all these big barns for yourself that you built. Well, God has a message for you. Behold, the days are coming when all that is in your house and that which your fathers have stored up till this day shall be carried to Babylon. Nothing shall be left, says the Lord. And some of your own sons, who shall be born to you, shall be taken away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Then said Hezekiah to Isaiah, "The word of the Lord that you have spoken is good." For he thought, why not, if there will be peace and security in my days? Which actually refers to the selfishness of his heart. Basically, when he's told, all this punishment is going to come on your kids and on your grandkids, he's like, all right, well, at least not on me. That's not too bad, I guess. Selfishness to the nth degree. And God gives him this message. You've worked for all of this, and you've been so successful, and it's all going to be taken away from you. How sad. So, and going back to Luke chapter 12, just to be very clear, I'm not saying we know for sure that's it, but it's awfully strange when you line up the life of Hezekiah, someone who lived so faithfully for the Lord so many years, and God blesses him greatly in return. And how sad that in his latter days he forgets about God and the importance of serving him, and everything becomes all about himself. And when he hears that for the punishment of his sins, his sons and his grandkids are going to suffer, he's so selfish in his heart that he says, I don't really care what happens to them. All I care is the good that comes in my lifetime. But think about that. All that he'd worked for is going to be taken away. And then what is he going to have to show for it? So the lesson in it for us, Luke chapter 12, our memory verse, for every one of us, take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things that he possesses. I want to say most, if not everybody in this room, has probably lived through a span when you were wondering how the electric bill was going to get paid that month, or how rent was going to be met. And I'm going to guess that every one of us also have lived through stretches where we look at it and we say, what have I done to deserve that? I don't even know what to do with this part of a blessing that God has given. And we've probably been between it all. But I hope that we can say confidently as Paul did, I get it, God, and thank you. Thank you for teaching me the lesson. Now I know what it's like to be brought low. I also know what it's like to abound and to overflow. But I do know this also, that I don't need anything outside of what I have right now. And whatever you want to share with me, if that's much and if it's little, I don't care. I have you, and you're all that I need. That's the meaning of Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That takes us through verse 21 of Luke 12. You win, Roy. You win. We will, though, believe it or not, finish it next time. I'm confident of that. We'll be able to move a little more quickly through some familiar, but we still do have that good conversation to be had, John. It's still on the docket. And the memory verse will still tease us. Luke 12:48. Are there varying degrees of reward and punishment? I anticipate as many good comments then as what we've had tonight. So let's read the remainder of this chapter. If you've read it, great. Reread it, become more familiar with it. Jot down some ideas as others have done for us tonight. We'll have discussion, Luke 12:48 memory verse. But anything else you'd like to say to close out our class? Okay. Thanks for all the great comments. Really enjoyed it. Appreciate you all.